Hello and welcome back, Andy Rodosovich. George Stoy here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. And November 9th is going to be a big one. Oklahoma headed up to Columbia, and I guess somewhat of a rivalry renewed, if you will. Big Eight ties, all of that. We welcome in Eli Hoff from the St. Louis Dispatch. Eli, thanks for joining us. This is a big one just in terms of, I know there's a lot of social media banter back and forth between the two fan bases, but it does kind of feel like there is, I don't know, something of a rivalry or something of return fellowship with the Missouri Tigers on November 9th.
Yeah, I think when you look at Missouri and Oklahoma, you can't look at it as a normal game. I don't know if we should go so far as to call it a rivalry, but it's not just another game on the schedule at this point. When you look at, the history these programs have had playing each other for so many decades to now more recently, some of the Twitter beef, some of the I don't know if you can call them scuffles, but recruiting tensions, transfer portal tensions, there's something there. Now, how much that translates to the field or translates to the stands, I don't know. It depends how many Mizzou fans are chronically online, which is probably a lot of them, but we'll see what happens there. But I'm excited for this game. I think a lot of Mizzou fans are too. I've heard from a lot of people who, this is the game they're making the trip for. It's like the Oklahoma game and homecoming are the two that they're planning to drive over for. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Eli, I think that a lot of, like you said, I don't think you can call it a rivalry, and I've gotten a lot of heat from OU fans for kind of maybe stirring that up a little bit. I asked Eli Drinkwitz a little bit about it back in Destin, but I did want to ask you about some of the recent stuff that has gone on between Oklahoma and Missouri, especially the Caden Green situation of him transferring to Missouri kind of unexpectedly because he was a starter at Oklahoma. You also have the Williams-Nwaneri recruitment from a year ago. That was, I guess, about a year ago now. I think it was August of last year, maybe September of last year, that all went down. Just, I guess, what's the feeling in the building towards Oklahoma from Missouri? And also talk about Caden Green and Williams-Nwaneri. What kind of role will those guys have this year at Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sense of satisfaction with those players, certainly from the fan base and probably from the coaching staff too, right? Just having gotten in and holding on to those guys. I think with Caden Green, he's someone who is going to come in. He's going to start from day one on this offensive line, barring something crazy happening. During spring camp, it looked like that was going to be at left tackle. Then Mizzou brought in Marcus Bryan, a transfer from SMU. So it looks like it might be more Caden Green at left guard. We'll see how that shakes out during fall camp. But he's someone who you're penciling in just right away to start on the offensive line. Williams-Nwaneri, it's harder to predict, partly because I haven't seen him in a Mizzou setup, seen him taking reps alongside these other guys. On paper, I feel like it's hard for a true freshman, an 18, 19-year-old kid to compete against SEC linemen, just regardless of talent, just based on physique alone. That said, he has the build. We'll see how many snaps he gets during non-conference games, if they kind of ramp him up. They also might choose to take it slow with him. There's experienced options ahead of him. It's just a little too hard to predict there, but it wouldn't shock me if both have big roles to play by the time that Mizzou-Oklahoma game comes around. I'm guessing both of them are going to want to play in that. I think there's maybe a little extra incentive given the opposition.
Let's talk this season. Obviously, expectations probably added, I don't want to say all-time high, but they certainly are high coming off of the best season for Missouri record-wise with the 11 wins since 2014. Just in terms of Eli Drinkwitz and what he's been able to build here, obviously we follow the recruiting stuff as well. They are having a run on that side of things. In terms of the current team heading into the season, what are the just flat-out expectations for this Missouri football team going into 2024?
Yeah. I don't think Eli Drinkwitz will maybe come out and say this as much. He'll kind of hint at it, but this is the year to make the college football playoff for Mizzou, right? It's 12 teams now. There are a lot more shots. If you're an SEC team with 2 losses where one of them isn't to, an FCS team or something, you can probably make it in. Mizzou would have made it in last year with last year's performance. So I think that's the expectation. Again, it's whether or not they admit it too much. But you look at this schedule for Mizzou, and I think there's a lot of optimism there. They're at Alabama for the first time in a while. But if there's a time to be at Alabama, this year seems like it's probably the year. Again, who knows what the Tide are going to end up looking like. So I think there's a lot of optimism around that. It's the last year of this offensive core, just especially having Luther Burden in the team. Having Brady Cook in the team. There's some expectation of hey, you got to use these guys while you have them. But it's also interesting to view. At this time last year, Eli Drinkwitz his seat was getting a little warm. He had the recruiting wins, but he had a losing record as the coach at Mizzou. An 11-win season obviously flips the script entirely. He's gotten an extension now. He's a lot more secure in his job. There's probably more concern that he would walk away than that Mizzou would be cutting ties with him. But it's interesting to look at this Mizzou team because again, it's these expectations are would have been unheard of a year ago at this time.
I think Missouri is such an interesting team this year because there's so much belief that they can be maybe a SEC championship type contender, at least getting to that game. And then, like you said, Eli, getting into the playoff. And I think that starts with Brady Cook and Luther Burden. I mean, I think Luther Burden and as Oklahoma fans know, they wanted Luther Burden. OU lost that recruiting battle a few years ago to Missouri. What is the expectation for those two? Just how good do you think Brady Cook and Luther Burden can be in that offense?
I mean, Luther Burden certainly should be able to perform at an All SEC, probably All American level. He's been on I think a couple preseason All American teams already. Brady Cook, you look at him, Mizzou needs him to be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC if they want to contend for a championship. Probably more like a top 2-3 quarterback, and that's there if he can take that leap. But what I think matters more for this season is their ability to just make the 3 or 4 plays that could be a difference between 9 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins. You look at last season, Mizzou benefited from Harrison Mevis, the kicker, draining that 61-yard walk-off to beat Kansas State early in the year. And then you relied on Brady Cook and Luther Burden connecting on a 4th and 17 to get a last-minute drive against Florida to win that game. Without those plays, Mizzou probably loses both those games, and last season looks different. So you need that type of play to happen this year. And even looking back at last year's Mizzou losses, they tended to come down to a couple of Brady Cook interceptions late in the game. He had a great year, and so you don't want to say, he blew it or something like that, but those were relevant plays at the end of those games. Cleaning that up, getting those types of production, just again, it feels weird to say that the whole season could come down to 4 or 5 plays, but in some ways it does. And I think that's what could really matter for Mizzou this year.
Who are some of the other guys around Luther Burden and Brady Cook that Missouri fans will look to kind of step up into bigger roles this year offensively?
Yeah, well, I think one that Oklahoma fans will be aware of, just Theo Weiss is someone who will have a big role to play in the offense. His contested catchability really popped to me last year, and I think it popped to this offense in general. So seeing when they look for him in the red zone, I think will be really key. One player I'm interested in watching is Brett Norfleet. He's a tight end. As a freshman last year, he came in and kind of did what you would want a true freshman to do, where his role just expanded throughout the year to where he was a starter by the end. He, in a game against Arkansas, scored 2 touchdowns, and I think it was like less than 10 seconds of game time because of a fumble on a kickoff return. So he's someone who he's 6'6", 6'7", but he can hurdle dudes. He just great athleticism. So I'll be looking a lot for him. The running back tandem of Nate Noel and Marcus Kerr will be interesting to watch. If anyone watched Cody Schrader last year, he helped the offense a lot by doing that. So having to replace that is tough, but it goes to 2 guys. And I think those are some of the big names to watch offensively.
Eli, on the other side of the ball, what is that defense going to look like? I know that Missouri was active in the transfer portal there as well as got some young, like we mentioned, Williams Nwaneri, some young talent that are freshmen. What is the defense?
Replacing a defense coordinator as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that side look like with a new staff over there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question mark, I think, with this team, just because before you had Blake Baker, who was, one of certainly the better defensive coordinators in the SEC, sign the extension, say he wants to be in Columbia, and then pretty much out of nowhere, boom, he's taking the LSU job. And so that was sort of an unanticipated coaching search. They brought in Corey Batoon, who was the D coordinator at South Alabama, but has experience at Ole Miss, Hawaii, some other stops. The scheme should remain pretty similar, so I think that will alleviate some concerns for Mizzou folks. You're needing someone like Dalen Carnell, who plays the star or nickel role. He needs to be a leader on this defense. A couple very experienced linebackers, and Chuck Hicks, who's playing I think this is going to be his 7th year of college football. He's been around the block. You need someone like that to play like a guy who's been around. Someone like Williams Nwaneri could be really intriguing, especially as he comes on later in the season. I think there will be a lot of eyes on the cornerbacks. Mizzou lost both the starting corners from last year to the NFL. So now they have Dre Norwood, who is a backup, stepping in, and then Toriano Pride, who it was kind of a similar situation to Caden Green, where he was an in-state guy, went somewhere else for his freshman year, and then very quickly in the transfer portal, Eli Drinkwitz brought him back. He's someone who, when I saw him suited up in full pads for the spring game, he walked by, and I thought he was like a running back at first, just the way he's built. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like in coverage.
George had wrote an article a couple weeks ago just kind of ranking all the SEC games this year on the schedule. And I think that it was one of the things like that we got caught up talking about was there's so many swing games for Oklahoma, it feels like, going into the unknown of what the SEC is. In terms of what Missouri has on the schedule, it seems like, I think, relatively a quote-unquote easier schedule for the SEC. What are some of those swing games for Missouri, or maybe the games that you look at as, okay, they could have a really, really good, maybe even a national championship or a college football playoff type year if you're able to get through these games and position yourself for some of the games on that back end of the schedule where Oklahoma will kick off November?
Yeah, I think there are certainly some interesting ones. And again, big picture, it's a favorable schedule for Missouri. The first road game is at Texas A&M, which is, as far as road environments go, like that's a pretty tough one to step into for your first road game. And Eli Drinkwitz's teams have sometimes struggled on the road. So I think that will be an interesting one where if Mizzou can win that game, handily, then all of a sudden they take a big step forward as far as contender status goes. The most random game is away at UMass. So they're going to be playing in Amherst, Massachusetts in front of 17,000 fans, a lot of whom will probably be Mizzou fans, honestly, making the trip. That's one where it just you need that game to be over by the middle of the third quarter at the latest, I think, just with that being on the schedule. The Oklahoma game is obviously a big test, especially because by that point, if Mizzou is going to have contender status, that would probably be in place by that point. But maybe the game that will honestly say the most about Mizzou will just be a road trip to Tuscaloosa playing at Alabama this year. It's a more favorable year in theory to get the Tide, but that's not an easy environment, never an easy team to play against. And if Mizzou goes and is competitive in that game, or even if they win that game, I think the whole conversation changes at that point. But it's also a game where if Missouri goes out and loses that one, there's, nobody's really probably hanging their heads after losing to the Tide in Alabama.
I think there will be a lot of Oklahoma fans cheering. Nick Evers ended up at UMass, didn't he?
I did not know that.
I'm pretty sure he did.
Oh, well, Nick Evers, he's a legend around
your time will come, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Eli, I've been asking kind of everybody this as we've done this SEC preview of just kind of what are the thoughts from Missouri as Oklahoma enters the league, not just in football, but all sports, and Texas as well. And I think that Missouri has such a unique perspective because it wasn't long ago that Missouri was entering this league. And obviously Missouri has a history with Oklahoma, Texas, going back to their days in the Big 12 and the Big 8. But just what is the feeling? I feel like there's definitely some animosity. We talked about it at the top of the show. But what's just, I guess, the feeling around the program and also the fan base as Oklahoma and Texas enter the SEC?
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at because of the history that you mentioned, but also just Missouri fans' view of realignment is interesting because, in some ways you can look back at what Mizzou did in joining the SEC as kind of kicking all of this off in some ways, even though this last wave happened a decade later. So I think that's interesting for one. There's certainly some, animosity and tension like we talked about, but I think there's more energy kind of as a result with Mizzou fans versus with it being Texas and Oklahoma versus, I don't know if it was Iowa State and Kansas State, and there's proximity there, but, with it being Big 12 foes who are, traditionally pretty good across sports, right? Whether it's football or even, I think SEC softball is going to be fascinating now, but, looking at things like that, there's a connection there. There's a tie there. These recruiting battles that happen between Missouri and Oklahoma or Missouri and Texas, now it's not across conferences anymore. It's in the same conference for the same talent. So I think all of that becomes a lot more intriguing, a lot more compelling. And, I think it'll be fun when Oklahoma comes up here for the first time. I think it'll be probably fun when Missouri goes down to you guys for the first time. A lot of that is going to be an interesting dynamic to watch just to see what it looks like a decade after it happened for the last time.
I got to call myself out. Nick Evers is at UConn.
Okay.
I'm just an idiot, and I know the comment section just realizes that, so we'll forget it. We'll move on. Good luck in stores, Mr. Evers. Just in terms of when Oklahoma fans come up there in November, I know that there's a lot of people that I'm sure are familiar with Columbia, haven't been up there in a while. I know Shakespeare's is a place to get to, but what are some of the game day stops before we get you out of here, Eli?
So this is the spot that I think everybody should go to. There's two things you got to know. One, it's going to be busy. Two, they don't take credit cards, so you need to bring cash. But in downtown Columbia, Booch's Burgers is the best place to go. It's these little burgers. They're not quite sliders. They're bigger than sliders. The rule is you get one for a snack, 2 for a meal, and 3 if you're really hungry.
I like that rule.
Get them in there. They've got chili and hot dogs and chips and stuff. It's a very old school dive bar. Again, it gets busy on game days like everywhere does, and you need cash. They do not take credit cards. I don't think they take checks either, so bring cash.
Yeah.
But that's the spot that I'd recommend if you want to get the Columbia experience when you're up here.
I love it. He is Eli Hoff, St. Louis Dispatch and or Post Dispatch, and we really appreciate it. It's going to be a really exciting season as Oklahoma embarks into the Southeastern Conference, and should be a fun one to follow. I don't know what's going to happen. It seems like this whole college football season going to be a little unhinged. We appreciate it, man.
For sure, happy to do it. It should be a fun one, whatever happens.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, Eli.